We're going to continue on with UV mapping with a little bit more details and creating a custom map for our shape. So let's do this. Let's just hide this cube and Shift A, create a new one. Oops, don't do it in edit mode. Tab into object mode, Shift A, create a cube. Okay, so we've got a new cube, and if we tab into edit mode, you see that the UVs that were attached to the other cube disappear, and we're now left with this blank UV map. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to create our own. I'll show you how to do that, and go through over a lot of the keyboard shortcuts and kind of repetitive tasks that you're going to have to get used to doing when you do UV mapping. So first thing is we're going to clear or remove the current UV map. And there's a couple ways to do that. We can actually, let's try this. I'm going to go back into object mode and delete this cube. And I'm going to go to Shift A and create a new cube. And down here at the bottom, where you can change the size and things like that, there's a little checkbox that says generate UVs. We can uncheck that. And now when we tab into edit mode, there are no UVs. There's no default cross shape. That's probably the best way to do this, actually. So we've got no UVs related to this object. We're going to go into edge mode by hitting 2 on your keyboard, not on your keypad, remember. And what we're going to do is basically we're going to create these things called seams, which are a way to think of it as like cuts. So you have this box that all the edges are attached, and if you wanted to cut this box open so that it laid flat, you would have to come up with a way to do that. And there are multiple ways to do it, and I'm going to show you one way and look at how it opens up. So unselect the whole object by just clicking off of it or hitting A twice, and in edge mode we're gonna do this. I'm gonna click this edge, I'm gonna hold down Shift, and I'm gonna click the edge opposite to it. So these two edges are selected, this one and this one, hard to see, and I'm going to select the front edge, and then I'm going to select this back edge, the one opposite it. Now I'm not going to select this fourth edge on the top. So imagine that if I cut this box here, here, and here and opened it, it would lift open. And that's what we want. And then it's going to continue to unfold down the sides. And then finally, I'm going to click this edge and this edge. So, and I'm not clicking this edge. So I'm basically going to kind of cut this box open in this way and see how it lays flat. So with all those edges selected, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 edges selected. Here's the step. You hit the letter U on your keyboard and you choose Mark Seams or Mark Seam. And then you can take a look at what you did. So I've got these seams all marked. These are the cuts that it's going to make. And then I'm going to hit A on the keyboard to select everything, and U again. And here I've got these choices of how to unwrap it. I'm just going to simply choose the top choice, unwrap. And voila, we have basically a perfectly unfolded cube. It's a different shape and a different orientation than it was when we did it the last time, or when the default did it. That's fine. There are many ways to unfold a cube. This way works just fine. Just depends on which edges you select. If we selected different edges, it would unfold differently, but we did do it properly. And we did enough edges that it didn't cause problems. So just to demonstrate kind of what an incorrectly unfolded cube would be, I'm going to undo this, and I'm going to unselect everything. And I'm going to try to do this differently. So I'm going to select this edge, the front edge again, so those three. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead and hit U, mark seam. So I'm basically telling it just unfold, just see what would happen if I unfolded the cube, tried to unfold the cube with these seams. So hit A to select all, U, unwrap. Okay, so here is an example of a poorly unwrapped cube. This square here, I'm going to just guess, is this face, right? Which unwrapped fine because we made the 3 seams. But the rest of the cube did not unwrap properly at all. It tried to. That's the bottom face, which is terribly distorted. The side faces basically turned into triangles. No good. Okay, so let's undo that. All right, and we're going to practice one more time. So I'm going to select this edge, this edge, this edge. Sorry, try that again. Let's see. Okay, we got edge, 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 bottom edge, bottom edge, U, mark seams. So let's see if those 3 down the sides. Good. Okay, A, U, unwrap. Great. All right, in good shape. So let's do this. We're going to, with the whole thing selected, remember that if you want the object selected, you're going to repeat the steps we did last time. Hit UV, export UV layout, and I'm going to call this, going to go to the desktop, save it, and I'm just going to call this cube custom UV layout. Can't spell. Okay. Save that to the desktop. Good. Going into Photoshop. Now, I downloaded this from Google and just did an image search for dice layout or dice image something texture. So this comes in, oriented in this way. There's so many different ways to kind of match this to the UV texture. We can rotate the UV texture in Blender. We can rotate it in Photoshop. We're going to do one way, and hopefully you'll kind of understand how you could approach this in multiple ways. So I'm going to open my custom layout that I just made, which looks like this. And I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and use this as my kind of master file, and I'm going to go over to my dice image that I downloaded from the internet, and I'm going to well, there's multiple ways. I'm just do it simple and just select all, select copy, Command C, and paste it. Okay, so I've pasted it in Photoshop, and it's the top layer, and which means it covered up the layer beneath it. If I drag the layer order so that the UV layout is above, I can see how it should be laid out. And so basically, in a nutshell, I just need to orient this dice image to match the UV layout. Again, I could do this the other way around. I could simply export this into Blender and rotate this UV layout. I could select this whole UV layout, hit R, and rotate it to match the image. Either way, let's look at the first way. So let's do it in Photoshop. So I'm going to take this layer, and in Photoshop it's Control T, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to also just drag it down so it literally matches up or gets very close. For our purposes, that's perfect. So now I've got let's see if this is actually what I want it to be. Oops. Huh. D. I want to make sure of something here. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so remember that before we export this, we're going to turn off our UV layer, so we hide it so it's not overlaying. And I'm just going to go to image, or sorry, save, file, save as. I'm going to call this, I'm going to turn this into a JPEG and call it cube dice JPEG. Save it to the desktop. Oh, cube dice texture. I like to label things textures if I'm going to use them as textures. So there, save. All right, back to Blender. Here we are. Go back to object mode. Let's create a new material. So again, we're just repeating what we did before. We've got a new material now. In the base color area, we're going to click on the little circle. Image texture. It turns black, which is what we want. And then we need to attach the texture we just created. So we're going to hit open right beneath image texture and desktop. And what we called it was cube dice. I didn't mean to put textures, but that's it. Cube dice textures. Open. And if you hit tab and look at your UVs, God. All right. We have very good news. It looks like our die mapped perfectly onto our cube because our UVs matched perfectly. So if I go over to the UV map here and I select all of it, and like I talked about, if I rotated that map, 90 degrees, everything would be off, right? So in this case, we would, if we were to have reversed the whole process, we could have known that the picture in Photoshop, okay, we would have known the picture in Photoshop was oriented this way, and we'd say, oh, well, let's just rotate our UV map in Blender, and we rotate in Blender and export that out. So again, approach it any way you like. It's the same result. It doesn't matter which way it's oriented, just as long as you mark the seams correctly. So that's the basic process for a very simple object, marking a cube. The next video, we're going to get a little bit more complex of an object, one that has some curvature, and we'll talk about the strategy you might use to unwrap something that's not as simple as a cube, which most things you're making are not. So UV mapping gets pretty complicated pretty quickly, but that's good for now.